All right. So last week we were getting into Elihu's speech in chapter 32. We talked about how the speech between Job, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar wasn't like in private. It was somewhere public. And I don't know, I assume that it was on the ash heap because that's where it said Job was. I don't know if they moved somewhere for public discourse, like or it doesn't say. And I don't know exactly what would have been typical there, but whatever the case, we know that people were listening. And we know that because Elihu at this point is going to chime in after Job and the other three get done talking. And somebody asked the question about like, well, when did they start listening? And that's where I don't know if they came in from the beginning, like if Job and his friends moved off the ash heap and went to the town gate, like might be typical in that time for the discourse, or if people just started hearing Job speaking, let's go find out what's going on because they hadn't talked for a week, or what exactly might have been the case there, but. Whatever was happening there, I think I envision there being a crowd at this point, probably. Not just Elihu, but probably several others were probably there too, is my guess. And so Elihu, who's part of the crowd, decides that he needs to say something. We talked a little bit about Elihu, not much is known of him. He appears to maybe have been a relative of Abraham because it's mentioned that he is a Buzite, which is in Abraham's family lineage. So that's what we know about him. He appears to be younger now than how much younger, I don't know. He could have been a teenager, or he could have been just younger than the others that were speaking there. So he's younger than they were, is the other thing that we know here. The other thing that we talked about a little bit toward the end of last week was just about how in our society we're becoming more and more isolated. And, we didn't mention this, but what's causing people to become more isolated, do you think?
Today?
Yeah, today.
All the social media and everything else, people are consumed by the screen in front of them and not with the world.
So the opportunity to be able to just sit at home and be entertained or communicate through the computer, I think that's definitely something big. What else?
I mean, along with social media, it's just the pressure to put a public persona out there for everybody that's not really you.
Yeah. Does anybody know anybody who they know personally that is like what the person you know is very different than the person that you see on Facebook or on whatever? We all probably know somebody like that, right?
Yep. They're designed to do that. And
there are whistleblowers at Facebook and Instagram and all these different places where they're saying like we build the algorithms to where if you're not smiling and you're not like doing these big adventures, then you don't
show up.
Basically. Yeah. So there's this constant pressure mounted for people to just constantly perform and edit.
Yep, no doubt about that. Another thing that's led to more isolation, of course, is COVID. Policies that were instituted because of COVID led many people to just stay at home. I think most people are not isolating at home any longer for that, but there are still some, I think, that are still isolating because of COVID. And so that's also led to, I think that would lead to more anxiety and isolation with fear of that and other illnesses, I think. So there's lots of different things that are causing us to, or causing people to be isolated. So the question that I asked and that we talked about was, how can we stay connected to each other? And I think it has to be intentional. I think we have to intentionally get together. Yeah, and so it's hard to convince people of that. So if people aren't wanting to do that, that's a difficulty that we're going to encounter with people, is that they don't want to get together. But I think it is important that we do. And we talked about, that what does that mean from a church perspective? What does that mean? Of course, we have opportunities to get together on Sunday morning, and then during the week on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Every week we have those meetings that we are able to get together. What else? I mean, like we just went to Kennywood yesterday, but that's not for everybody. Not everybody is going to want to go to Kennywood. So what are some ideas that we have about how we can get connected and be connected with each other? So we talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, inviting people into our homes.
Inviting people into your house, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think we've gotten away, at least I know we have gotten away from that a little bit, especially there again with COVID. Weren't supposed to invite people over to your houses, right?
Going along with that, I think just being a good neighbor.
Being a good neighbor.
Yes, there are some grumpy ones out there, but even to them, just show them love like you're supposed to. I know the Bible talks about loving your neighbor, not literally, but I think in this day and age, we do need to do that literally. It's reach out. Those beside us are close to us.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening in our society. Neighborhoods aren't really neighborhoods as much in many cases.
Well, that's productive than we used to be too. You can't get people to do anything anymore. It's work. People don't want to work.
Yeah, well, yeah, there is a culture of less emphasis, I guess you would say, on hard work. That don't even get me started on that as far as what causes that. But that comes from just culturally and from policies being put in place. That would be the case. So yeah, there's a lot of things leading to this, and I think, like I said, we have to be intentional about not going there. We have to be intentional about being social and getting together, and if possible, finding ways to get people that aren't part of our group into our group, like at least connected with our group. There again, you can't ever force people, but we need to try to as much as possible get people. That's called get people attached, and that's something called friendship evangelism, and that's really, I think, to me, that's the only thing that I can think of that's really a possibility right now, because there's too much out there for people to consume that they don't care. That's not part of Christianity or religiousness. We got to get them connected somehow with us. So I think that's important, and that's what we're trying to think of as different ways of doing that.
When we were younger, we used to connect over the telephone. We used to talk to each other. We used to see how each other were doing. Anything I can do for you? How's everything? And
Yep.
you don't see that anymore. People are too shut in now. They're too.
And that's what we're saying. Yeah, we have to be intentional about doing that, like staying in contact with each other. Now, it doesn't have to be phone necessarily. It could be, in person's good, or there's lots of different ways on the computer now that you can actually talk as opposed to just writing with different things that you can actually communicate.
Yeah, but
so
texting and stuff like that is just not the same as being face to face.
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like you could do video conferencing or things like that as well. At least on some things. I don't know what all there is out there, Skype and Teams and stuff like that. So, but yeah, it's definitely texting. Texting, one thing you got to be careful of on texting is that you can't. Lots of people do texting in short text, and you can't convey. What would you say? Emotion as well, or whatever. Like, so some people might take a text, and same with email, in the wrong way. Or you got to be careful whenever you're wording a text or an email, because you can easily be taken in a way that you don't mean. And in fact, we see that a lot. It happens all the time in public, right, with people having to delete tweets and things like that because it wasn't taken the way that they meant it.
Each other face to face eliminates that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things like that that we have to be aware of. And then actually, and that kind of was our next question, what are some good ways that we can make ourselves available to people, especially those who are suffering, that we talked about, and those are things that we want to continue to think about. All right, so then what we're going to do today is we're going to start in on chapter 32 with Elihu. He does a better job of analyzing the situation and providing Job with the counsel that he needs. And we know this because at the end, whenever God comes in to talk, he doesn't rebuke Elihu like he does Job and his friends. And of course, actually, his hardest rebuke is on Job's friends, critics, and then he does correct Job on some thinking, but he doesn't say anything about Elihu. Now then, does that mean that Elihu is correct in everything that he says? No, we're going to see some things that I don't think Elihu was absolutely accurate on whenever he talks, but as a general overview of what Elihu has to say, most of what he has to say is coming from a better place than what the others were when they were talking. All right, so Elihu's initial remarks are meant to address Job's critics. He had listened to their speeches, and he notes that they did not convince Job. And of course, they wouldn't convince Job, because Job knows that he didn't do what they're saying he did. So now Elihu is going to answer Job with a different take on the situation. So let's read verses 1 through 5 of chapter 32.
So these three men stopped answering Job because he was righteous in his own eyes. But Elihu, son of Barachel, the Buzite, the family of Ram, became very angry with Job, justifying himself rather than God. He was so angry with the three friends because they had found no way to refute Job, and yet had to condemn him. But now Elihu had waited before speaking to Job because they were older than he. But he saw that three men had nothing more to say. His anger was aroused.
All right. So he's angry with Job for refusing to acknowledge his pride. We'll see that more as he talks here. And he rebukes his critics because they weren't able to refute what Job was saying. And we talked about why that was. They were so stuck on whatever it was that they had decided on their way to talk to Job or whatever. You just see how that argument between Job and those three just kind of goes down a track. And we talked about how, we want to make sure that we don't do that whenever we're trying to make a point to somebody. We don't necessarily want to be so set on proving our point that we start just throwing out false accusations, which is basically what they did. And make sure that the conversation actually is profitable, as opposed to what they did, which was just continue going down the same line of thought and pushing Job further and further into a corner, basically. All right, so let's read 6 through 14.
So Elihu, son of Barachel, the Buzite, said, I am young in years, and you are old. That is why I was fearful, not daring to tell you what I know. I thought, age should speak, advanced years should teach wisdom. But it is a spirit in a person, the breath of the Almighty, that gives them understanding. Where am I here? It's not only the old who are wise, but not only the aged who understand what is right. Therefore I say, listen to me. I too will tell you what I know. I waited while you spoke. I listened to your reasoning while you were searching for words. I gave you my full attention, but not one of you has proved Job wrong. None of you has answered his arguments. Do not say, we have found wisdom, let God, not man, refute him. But God has not marshaled his words against me, and I will not answer him with your arguments.
Okay. So Elihu states that true understanding is found in God, and he says that age does not automatically mean someone has more wisdom. So that sounds a little bit, reminds me of what Paul says to Timothy about Do not let them look down on your age. Is it possible for somebody younger than us to have wise things to tell us? Certainly. And can we learn things from people younger than us? Of course. So that's kind of what he's saying is that, he's basically already trying to, he's a step behind as he's starting this. He's like, I know you're not going to listen to me because I'm younger than you, but age isn't the only thing that brings wisdom. True wisdom is found in God. So he tries to explain a little bit to Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar and Job about how he interprets their discussion and lays it out. All right, so let's do 15 through 22.
They are dismayed and have nothing more to say. Words have failed them. Must I wait? Now they are silent. No matter what they stand, there is no reply. I too will have my say. I too will tell you what I know. For I am full of words, and the spirit within me compels me. Inside I am like bottled up wine, like new wineskin ready to burst. I must speak and find relief. I must open my lips and reply. I will show no partiality, nor I will flatter anyone. For if I was skilled in flattery, my Maker would soon take me away.
All right. So Elihu tells Job that the reason he has to speak to him now, even though Job has silenced his critics, he feels led to speak, and he actually has a feeling like he will blow up if he doesn't get to say something here. Have you ever had that feeling where you just have to say something? Filling the pit of your stomach. Most often comes with people we're close to, like in close relationships, and something's happened, and you're having that I just have to get this out, like kind of feeling. It can happen in other places too, it's that kind of feeling like where you can't sleep at night. You're going over what you have to say, or you're thinking those kind of things. I think that's kind of what he's saying here. Like if I don't say something, I'm just going to blow up. And he actually believes that God will hold him accountable if he doesn't say something. And that just made me think, many times in my life where I've had that debate, not in the personal relationship like what I was talking about, but in public where you're debating, should you say something or should you stay silent about what's going on? Sometimes it is, and that's the question. When is it better to stay silent versus when is it better to speak up? Especially as you think about social media and what the ramifications are for depending on what you put out there.
You gotta understand, is it going to change anything? If I say anything, is it going to matter? Is it going to change anything?
Mm-hmm. Or is it just going to make things worse? Sometimes whenever we feel like we have to say something, it can make things worse. But there are times where I think things are getting worse because good people aren't saying something, because we don't speak up. So how do we decide?
Did you ever feel it doesn't matter what I say, it's still going to be the same anyway?
Well, that's what I mean. That's the thinking on some people, but if everybody thinks that way and nobody ever speaks up, what does that end up causing? It means that the loudest people are the ones that are dictating what's going on, and that's what I think we're seeing a lot of things here in our society.
Right, that's the government we live in.
Yeah. So how do we decide? How do we decide when we should speak? And I'm not going to give an answer because I don't know exactly, but something to consider. And I don't think it's always the right thing to say, well, we should just be silent. I think that at times we do need to speak up.
I think this is a good case in point that when your emotions are ready to explode, that's probably a good time to remain silent.
Yeah. Whenever you're that bound up, you may not want to. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking. Like a lot of times when we're ready to blow up, that's not a good time to
You're not thinking rationally.
to do it. Yeah.
You better think and reflect before you.
Of course, I don't know in this case if Elihu is angry, that angry, I mean, he is angry. We know he's angry, but if he's that angry that he's going to blow up, or if he's just saying, I have to say this because I feel like I'm led to say it. Like, I don't know which one's stronger in this case. Because when we feel led to say something, I think the first thing I think we have to do is really think through how we're going to say it. Like you said, like if you're just blowing up, that's not a good idea. But if we can actually think through, okay, so what do we have to say, and why am I going to say it? Like, I know whenever Facebook first came out and there were all those big discussions, and there probably are still a bunch of them. I don't ever get involved in any debates on Facebook or anything like that. But there was only ever one time that I got involved on one, because I was like, somebody just has to say something on this, because it was somebody who used to be a Christian who's now an atheist, and he had decided that he pointed to, they were building the Ark, the Ark Encounter in wherever it is, in Ohio or whatever. Is it Kentucky? It's right on the border there, right? Like, yeah, anyway, so it's in Kentucky. And he posted something about, look at what all it takes for them to build this now, and you're telling me Noah did it back thousands of years ago? And I was like, the premise of that statement was so wrong that I just felt like I had to say something there. I was like, yeah, Noah did it because God told him to do it and helped him do it. It couldn't have been done without God. That's kind of the point. And so, I just felt like I had to say something there. And that actually led to a much longer, and this is why I don't like doing it, because then it just keeps going and going and going and going. But that was one time where, and that was probably the only time, I think, that I ever felt like I needed to get on and say something about something that somebody had posted, because it was like, just the premise has to be corrected there. Yeah, we're telling you that it happened because God did it. No person could have done it. No person would have known to do it. And no person would have known how to do it. So that was a time where, like, I felt that I had to say something. But I wasn't intending to even go down that road. But anyway, we need to be careful about what we have to say and how we say it. I think what Jimmy said is really good. When you're angry or going to blow up, that goes back to what I had read from the commentary back a couple weeks ago about the guy who told Abraham Lincoln told the guy who was mad, and he told this guy, go ahead and write this letter to this guy. And so the guy wrote the letter, and it was all full of all this anger and everything that he had done. And then when Abraham Lincoln read it, he said, yeah, that's good. Now throw it away and go write another one. So the problem today is when you write that thing and then you hit send, it's already out there. So there's been many times where I've written an email to somebody and I don't hit send. Like I leave it sit there and think about it for a couple days before I ever send it. Sometimes I even have somebody read over it and be like, did this communicate what I'm trying to communicate? if it's a big situation.
I think that's the difference between that approach and what Elihu did, because he didn't consult with other people, and it sounds like, he's been sitting on this for a while.
Well, as they were talking, yeah, he's been stewing over it, yeah.
He's taking it all in. He's like, I shut my mouth for as long as I could, and I've been thinking about this, and I've been listening, and that's just making it more irrational. He's just totally overcome with emotion.
Right. And what he has, like I said, a lot of what he has to say is good, and not along the same lines as what the others were going down. But he definitely has an edge to what he has to say. So the other question that I wanted to just throw out here and not really focus on, but just to think about, how can we equip ourselves to be ready to provide counsel to those who are suffering, or to those who are, when you see something like that you feel like, oh, I need to say something, or I need to be there, how can we be prepared to do that? And the only thing that I'll say to that is, of course, you have to have the knowledge to be able to do that. We have to be prepared to do that by knowing God's word, by having experience in our lives, by taking the time to think it through, all those kind of things. We need to do that before we try to provide that kind of counsel. And there's other things that we can do, but like I said, I didn't want to stop and focus on that. But that's just something for you to think about is you know, are you prepared for that? Are you ready to talk to somebody who's in a bad spot? All right, anybody have any other comments on 32 before we go on to 33 here? All right, let's read, well, actually, before we read it, let me just give a little background. So Elihu now is going to tell Job that he may not have needed to repent of sins leading up to his predicament, but he now needs to repent because he's been prideful in his discussions toward God specifically, and what he was saying about God as the discussion with Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar went. So he's basically accusing Job of becoming prideful in this. And we talked about that, how Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar kind of led him down that road because they kept accusing him of all these wrongdoings that he hadn't done. But at the same time, you know, did Job say some things that he shouldn't have? Yeah, he's angry, he's upset, he's hurting, and he did say some things that he shouldn't have. All right, so let's go to, let's read verses 1 through 7 of 33.
But now, Job, listen to my words. Pay attention to everything I say. I'm about to open my mouth. My words are at the tip of my tongue. My words come from an upright heart. My lips sincerely speak what I know. The Spirit of God has made me. The breath of the Almighty gives me life. Answer me then, if you can. Stand up and argue your case before me. I am the same as you in God's sight. I am a piece of clay. No fear of me should alarm you, nor should my hands be heavy on you. But you have said in my hearing, I hear the words, I am pure, I have done no wrong, I am clean and free from sin. Yet God has found fault with me, he considers me his enemy. He fastens my feet in shackles, he keeps close watch on all my paths. But I tell you, this is not right, for God is greater than any mortal.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Okay, so Elihu says that he is a man created by God just like Job. And so because of that, Job should be able to hear what he has to say without the fear that Job was saying he would have in trying to talk to God. So he says he's not intending to harm Job, but to correct some of the things that have been said. And then he says that he heard the things that Job said about how he is pure and without transgression and that God has treated him unjustly, and says that he is not correct in saying this and that God is greater than man. So he's basically saying God's greater than you are, and you can't say that you've done nothing wrong. So some questions here about what Elihu has to say. Had Job actually claimed to be without transgression? He had claimed to be righteous, but had he claimed to be without transgression? I don't see that's what Job had said. I think what he was trying to focus on was, these guys are all accusing me of having done this really great sin, and that's why everything bad's happened to me. I didn't do anything like that. That's what Job is saying. And that he's been righteous. But I don't really see what Job said as like, I'm perfect. I don't think that's what Job was trying to say. So Elihu there again has kind of interpreted what Job has said in that way. Do we ever do that? We interpret what somebody said and then kind of go with that and respond accordingly.
He's not claiming to be sinless.
Right, yeah, that's what Elihu almost seems to be saying, that Job is claiming sinlessness. I don't think that's what Job was saying. I think he was just saying, I didn't do the things that you're accusing me of. So I don't think that's, I think that's the way Elihu had interpreted what Job said, was, I'm perfect, and I don't think that's right. Why does Elihu state that God is greater than man in verse 12 when he says that Job is not right? Why did he feel like he needed to say that? In 12 it says, behold, let me tell you, you are not right in this, for God is greater than man.
Is he trying to tell him that if he did do wrong, that God knows it?
Maybe to some degree. He doesn't feel like Job has the right to accuse God of wrongdoing, I think, and that's basically what Job's saying. He's saying to God, you're incorrectly punishing me. And Elihu's like, how can you say that to God? How can you possibly say God is not right? He also felt like Job had become prideful in these declarations, like, he's yelling at God. Charles at times has talked about how when you're going through pain, do you ever feel like yelling at God? And you may, right? And so we need to be careful. I think really what I get out of this is kind of being careful about what we say, and especially to other people, when we're in a position where we're hurting. When we're hurting, we may feel like lashing out, or we may have anger or those kind of things, but we need to be careful. I think we can say things to certain people, maybe because they might help us through it, and then and we may want to question God or figure out what's going, try to figure out what's going on, but we just need to be careful about our attitude when we do that. And like I think Charles says, sometimes you get to the point where it's just like, okay, I just let go of it, and just leave it in God's hands, because that's all you can do. And I think that's a good attitude to have sometimes. When things are that bad, you can just say, okay, that's it.
You've got no answer, and you can't figure it out. Sometimes it is better to just let go.
And just pray and hope for something to happen. So I think that's important. So what had caused Job to become so bold in declaring righteousness and challenging God?
He knows he didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
In his mind, he didn't do anything wrong.
It's what his friends are saying, or his critics, as I said. Yeah, it's what they're saying. So he's coming back at him and saying, no, that's not the way it is. So there again, if we get the wrong people talking to us, what can happen? We can get led down the wrong road, and so we need to be careful on that front as well. That's what I was saying. Who do you talk to whenever you're in a bad spot? Be careful about who we open up to and who we're talking to. All right, we got about 5 minutes left. I don't know if we can get through this next section in 5 minutes, but I guess we'll get it started, because I don't want to just cut it off here. But I do, for verses 13 through 30 here of 33, I have a couple of questions that I wanted to throw out there to talk about, and I'll ask them, and then we'll talk about them after we read. So one question is, what does Elihu see as the purpose of suffering? If you remember what Job's critics have been saying is that he was suffering because he had done wrong. Excuse me. And that was the purpose, that it was a punishment. Another question, how do non-Christians view the consequences of sin?
Do they?
So think about that. Another question is, how does God communicate with people today? And then another question is, what role does the Holy Spirit play in a Christian's life today? And as I ask those questions, the last couple specifically could be a series of classes on their own. But I don't want to go that far into them. I just want to touch briefly on it for thought as we go through this section. But Elihu, well, before I say that, let's go ahead and read. Let's do 13 through 30.
Why do you complain to him that he responds to one's words? For God to speak now one way or another, though no one perceives it. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep in sleep falls on people as they slumber in their beds, he may speak in their ears and terrify them with warnings, to turn them from wrongdoing and keep them from pride, to preserve them from the pit, their lives perishing by the sword, or someone may be chastised on a bed of pain with constant distress in their bones, so that their body finds food repulsive, their soul loathes choicest meal, their flesh wastes away to nothing, and their bones once hidden now stick out. They draw near the pit, and their life to the messengers of death. Yet there is no angel on their side. A messenger, one out of 1,000, is sent to them to how to be upright. And he is great. And he is gracious to the person that says to God, spare them from going down the pit. I have found ransom for them. Let their flesh be renewed like child's. Let them restore as in days of their youth. Then that person can pray to God and find favor with him as they see God's face and shout for joy. And he will restore them to full well-being. And they go to others to say, I have sinned and perceived what is right, and I do not get what I deserve. But God has delivered me from going down the pit, and shall live going down with life. God does not do all these things to a person twice, even 3 times. Turn back to them from the pit. But the light of life may shine on them. Pay attention, Job, and listen to me. Be silent, and I will speak. If you have anything to tell me, answer me. Speak up, for I want to vindicate you. But if not, listen to me. Be silent, and I will teach you wisdom.
Okay, so Elihu believes that God speaks to people in dreams and visions. And he says that God does this to change someone's conduct and to keep them from pride. And then he also says that God chastises people with pain, and he uses Job's current condition as a picture of this. He then says that God uses angels sometimes to communicate with people, and that the angel would be gracious to them. So the result of these intercessions is a restoration of the person, both physically and spiritually, and that the person should be thankful to God. So, as I feared, we're almost out of time, and people are going to be coming up here in just a minute. But like I said, I want to talk about those 4 questions, and also about Elihu's view of suffering and how that relates to sin. So we'll pick up with that next week whenever we get back, and we'll be back in about 15 minutes for worship. Thanks, everybody.